Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Terre Haute. This congregation welcomes all people, regardless of their age, religion, race, nationality, ability, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or anything else that has been used to divide people. We are a group of people with our own opinions, our own ideas, our own dreams. But we share ideals. We share a common belief in a liberal religion. In our discussions, we may disagree with each other, but we must always remember that what unites us is stronger than what separates us. We must always end the service aware of the love that we have for each other.
Today's Being You, we address the third principle. Spiritual growth isn't about a vertical ascent into heaven, but about growth in every dimension at once. It's spirituality in 3D. Growth in spirit doesn't measure one's proximity to a God above, but rather the spaciousness of one's soul, its volume, its capacity, its size. We need souls that can take in the world in all its complexity and diversity, yet still maintain our integrity. We need souls that can love and be in a relationship with all of this complexity. Instead of fight or flight, we need a spiritual posture of embrace. The words of Reverend Rob Hardy's All Souls Church, Unitarian, Washington, D.C. The Place I Want to Get Back To by Mary Oliver. The place I want to get back to is where, in the pine woods, in the moments between the darkness and first light, 2 deer came walking down the hill. And when they saw me, they said to each other, "Okay, this one is okay. Let's see who she is and why she is sitting on the ground like that, so quiet as if asleep or in a dream, but anyway, harmless." So they came on their slender legs and gazed upon me, not unlike the way I go out to the dunes and look and look and look into the faces of the flowers. And then one of them leaned forward and nuzzled my hand. And what can my life bring to me that could exceed that brief moment? For 20 years I have gone every day to the same woods, not waiting, exactly, just lingering. Such gifts bestowed can't be repeated. If you want to talk about this, come to visit. I live in the house near the corner, which I have named Gratitude. And our opening hymn, number 168, One More Step.
We'll take one more step.
Today's transitional words are also by Mary Oliver. Messenger by Mary Oliver. My work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening yeast, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still half perfect? Let me keep in my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude, to be given a mind and a heart, and these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all over and over how it is that we live forever. Today's speaker is Bill Breeden.
Well, it's good to be back here this week. It's good to be with these gathered people here and with those who will see it later in spirit. Well, they may not see it in spirit, but we're with you in spirit now. You can drink some spirits as you watch it if you like. Got several things on my mind today. Just to tell you, catch up on Glenda and I. She was in, as I told someone earlier, she spent 3 nights and 4 days in the hospital a month or so ago for diverticulitis, which we caught in time before it got very serious, but they kept her there taking IV antibiotics because she can't take the antibiotic that's recommended for that. She's allergic to it. And she's doing well, and then she went back for one more 10-hour trip into the emergency room a few days ago for a complication of that. But she's doing well. She's getting much better and up and around, and she sends her gratitude for your thoughts and prayers. And you know, I see on Facebook all the time, thoughts and prayers. And you know, there's sometimes that gets a little tiring. We need to do more than thoughts and prayers about a lot of things in this world. We need to be actively involved in changing them rather than just thoughts and prayers. But then thoughts and prayers mean a lot, and I think that sometimes we Unitarians kind of write those things off, and maybe we shouldn't. A couple of announcements before I get into whatever I'm going to do. Last Sunday was International Palestinian Recognition Day for the Palestinian people, and I'm not going to read the long statement by the Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, for that day, but I would just say to you, having been to the West Bank in 2004, I want to raise that up and tell you the Palestinian situation today is worse than it was in 2004. Getting worse all the time. Children in detention has grown. It's just a terrible situation there. And during the Trump administration, it has gotten much worse because Trump has supported Netanyahu's establishment of new settlements and expansions of old settlements. And Gutierrez makes it very clear that the only way we'll ever get to a two-state peaceful solution of that conflict is the recognition of the borders agreed to by both sides in 1967, the peace accord in 1967. And we need to get back to that. And it's going to take a while, and hopefully we can begin that work next year, this coming year. So I would also tell you that there are some films available to see about the Palestinian situation, Palestinian children in particular, in the West Bank. And I will send a note to that to John or whoever does the midweek and you all put out a midweek thing. I'll try to remember to send those links to you. They're free movies. It's a major conference that's going on, but there have been 2 movies made about the children in the West Bank, and I recommend you see it. It's about children also incarcerated. So I'm going to pass on the Antonio Guerrero's declaration. You can find it online. John told me this morning that he hates it when I come over here, because every time I come over here, he has to go buy books. And so I'm going to give you another one, John, to buy. A book I just finished. It's a massive piece. It's by Isabel Wilkerson. She just has a new one out, by the way. By the title is Caste, C-A-S-T-E, and it's supposed to be really powerful. This was her first book for which she won the Pulitzer Prize. And it's an oral history of the greatest migration in history. And that migration is a migration of blacks from the South in America from 1917 through 1968. 6.5 million blacks left the South. And I really highly recommend this book. It's an oral history. It is based, she did thousands of interviews with both people who migrated and their children and grandchildren, and it tells the stories. The chapters are short, so you can read it at night, and you won't fall asleep before you get through your chapter. But I highly recommend it. It's called The Warmth of Other Suns, and that's a quote from the Richard Wright's poem, when he said, "I was leaving the South to fling myself into the unknown. I was taking a part of the South to transplant an alien soil, to see if it could grow differently, if it could drink of new and cool rains, bend in strange winds, respond to the warmth of other suns, and perhaps to bloom." So I highly recommend this, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. And of course, I like our UU Poet Laureate, Mary Oliver. Those 2 poems that Bill read this morning are in her book, Thirst, and I recommend that as well. And finally, point of personal privilege, because people buy a lot of books around Christmas time, my daughter has published a novel, and it's just come out. It's called Making It All Right. And as it says in the blurb here, by James Alexander Thom, set in the late 1940s Indiana, Denise Breeden's debut novel is a quiet masterpiece of domestic narrative with dramatic tension from beginning to end. And at the top it says, farm wife and tinkerer Mae Dixon has never met a problem she couldn't solve. Now she finds herself inventing a whole new kind of family. So I recommend the book. It's available on Amazon and also at Denise's own website called clockflowerpress.com. And then finally, as you know, Terre Haute has become the epicenter of capital punishment. Donald Trump has already executed 8, and he has 5 more scheduled, and I'm holding my breath that my friend Chad Fulks is not added between now and January 20th. Hopefully, after the new administration takes over, the federal death penalty will be abolished in the first term. But I will be in Terre Haute several days in the next coming weeks for these executions. I'm also going to be on a panel discussion. That's a nationwide panel about the death penalty. You can go to deathpenaltyaction.org and find out information. There'll be panels all week. Sister Helen Prejean will be on one, the big hitters. I'll be on one of faith leaders on Thursday. I believe it's at 1 o'clock. And Thursday, I believe, is the day of the next execution. So I'll be in Terre Haute. I'll have to find a place to get to Wi-Fi and get on my own, get on that panel. So I encourage you. I've been getting calls from around the state from different people asking when they could come. And I got a call yesterday from a guy who owned a woodworking shop in Bloomington that I've known for years. And he happened to see Chris Hayes' news last week. And Chris did a large segment about the executions, and I got a note from him and said, when is the next protest? I want to be there. So I've had a lot of people call this week, a lot of people contacting me about that. We will be over here on Thursday, and we'll be here every time they commit murder out there off of Highway 63. Mary Oliver says, instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one and precious life? Advent, waiting and not waiting, just lingering perhaps. Mom and I stuck in a snowbank. I wrote that down when I was reading about Mary Oliver not long ago. And that story happened to me around Christmas time back in what year was it? This is the mid-'80s when we were moving into getting ready to move into a teepee. My wife and Glenda and I and our two children, Denise and Dietrich, as young teenagers, barely. We were getting ready to move into a teepee, and my mother was a Stanley dealer at that time, and I went down to see her, went over to see her. We were living in Greene County at that time, but I went over to visit Mom. She said, well, can you help me deliver my Stanley orders, because there was snow, a lot of snow, and we lived in my old farmhouse where I grew up, and she still lived at that time, was on the side of a hill, and she asked me to help her deliver her Stanley products. As it so happens, the snow was worse than I thought, and we ended up in a snowbank and stuck. And so I walked back down to make a phone call to get a wrecker to come pull us out. Came back up to sit in the car with my mother, who was worried about her son, who was supposed to be the next Billy Graham, and turned out to be, she didn't know what I was doing. Living a very simple life. We were living without electricity. We were living on less than $6,000 a year by intention, so we could refuse to file taxes for the war machine. And we were getting arrested occasionally for a protest, and Mom was trying to figure out what happened to her holiness preacher boy. And as we were sitting there in that snowbank, she said to me, Bill, or she said Billy, she always called me Billy till the day I died, but she said, Billy, I don't even know what you think about God anymore. And we were sitting in that car in the silence, and I let the silence sit for a little bit. But then we were just up the hill from our old farmhouse, and the coal company had bought the hill above, and it began raking the trees off to mine for coal. And I said, well, Mom, if you can sit here and hear the trees screaming, then you might have some understanding about what I believe about God. And she sat with that, and we sat in silence for quite a while. And then went about our business when the tow truck came. And about a month later, Mom wrote her first letter to Ronald Reagan to talk about nuclear weapons and oppose nuclear weapons. This old, elderly holiness woman who had never written a protest letter in her life, who had never questioned her government in her life, decided to write Ronald Reagan about nuclear weapons. So, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Every once in a while you get gifted by something shifting in your life when you decide to live it and be it. Gratitude over darkness is kind of what I'm thinking of. I think that Mr. Trump hopefully only has about 50-some days left, or less than that. I don't know, it's right in that area. I want to be very clear that the darkness is not over yet. I watched Mr. Trump at his rally last night, the rantings of a madman saying he won every state. The rantings of a madman saying he's never lost and will never lose. And I read a statement by one of the White House staff members last week where he said Trump just walks around like a mad King George saying, I won, I won, I won. And then I turned on the radio on the way over here this morning and hear some preacher saying we have to stand up for Trump. In the name of Jesus, we have to stand up for Trump. It's a sad thing that many of the greatest supporters of this madness claim the Christian faith. In our military, there are a group called the Oath Keepers, and they've sworn an oath, not to the Constitution, but to what they say is the leader of the Christian nation. And who knows what's going to happen? We don't, we're standing at the corner of darkness and gratitude. And we have to make a decision. We can turn back into the darkness, or we can find gratitude and make it go forward. And by the way, I listened to Dottie's sermon last week. She sent me a note saying, we kind of picked the same type of topic and just thought you'd hear it. And thank you, Dottie, for that service. It's an honor to be a colleague of yours. Really it is. Thank you very much. That one poem of Mary Oliver's where she finishes and says, come and visit me at the house I built on the corner. I've named it Gratitude. I would have loved to have visited Mary Oliver. But we don't have to visit Mary Oliver to visit gratitude. Gratitude over darkness. I give thanks today for a man named Yusuf Nur. I may have told you about him last time I was here. I'm not sure if I did. Yusuf Nur is a Sunni Muslim, a member of the Bloomington Islamic Center. And a month and a half or so ago, I got a call asking if I could find a spiritual advisor for Orlando Hall, who was to be executed and did not have a spiritual advisor and wanted him Muslim, Sunni Muslim. And so I started contact with the Islamic Center, which our church has a very close relationship with and has since November, since 9/11 in 2001. During the week of 9/11, I was contacted by a woman in our church, said we need to reach out to the Muslim community. And so I did and asked them to come to our sanctuary and we'd clear everything out of it and make it an Islamic prayer room to get all the icons or anything that they didn't. We have a nude statue, the woman carved of a woman holding a baby. And so we moved all of that out of the sanctuary and it became a bare room for Islamic prayers. And they came to our congregation to break their Ramadan fast. They brought all the food. And that service, when I called the imam at the center that year, he said, I don't think anybody will come. We're all afraid. They're afraid to come out. But we had a small group of Muslims come out and then a fairly large group of UUs, and we had our dinner. And that has become one of the largest programs we have of the year. Every year during Ramadan they come and we celebrate and break fast with them. So I called over and asked them if they had anyone over there who would be interested in being a minister, a spiritual advisor to a man who is going to be killed. And I got a call from Yusuf Nur. And he said, I've never done anything like this. He's a business professor at IU. Wonderful human being. But he said, and I told him, I said, look, I want to be clear. If you take this on, he may ask you to be in the room with him when they kill him. That's probably going to happen. And you should know that before you say yes or no. And I said, I will think no less of you if you decide you can't do it. I've made that decision myself, but I don't think anybody ought to make it lightly. He came out to visit me for 3 hours. We sat outside the lake, and finally, after long conversations, I said, well, what do you think? He said, how could I say no? How could I say no? It's an opportunity to serve. And the first time he visited Orlando, a week or so later, it took about 2 weeks for me to get him approved. The first time he visited, he called me on the way home and he said, I'm learning more than I've ever learned in my life. He said, this man has been on a spiritual pilgrimage like no one I've ever met in my life. You need to understand, or we need to understand, there are 13 people, 8 of which have already been killed, and 5 more to go Mr. Trump wants to kill, Mr. Barr and Trump. Those 13 people have spent 289 years in solitary confinement. 289 years. Orlando Hall spent 27 years in solitary confinement. Now, You spend time in solitary confinement, you either become insane or you learn how to be a human being. That's the only two options I've found when I meet people who've been there. Some of them do literally go insane. Some of them discover what it means to be a human being. Orlando certainly did. And Yusuf was with him when he died. And I was over outside on the Dollar General store corner over there. By the way, we won a lawsuit against the Indiana State Police and the prison that allowed us to get close to the prison. The first two executions, they had roadblocks, and we won that. Well, the Indiana State Police just said, "You're right, we won't do it anymore." I don't know what the Fed said. But so I'm over there for every execution, and I was there for 10 hours when Orlando was to be executed, and I'd sent Yusuf a text that he would get when he got out of the death chamber saying, "I'll be at the gates over by the dollar store when you get out if you need to talk." And he finally came out about 1 o'clock and came to the dollar store. And some of you may have seen him on Channel 2 was there, and when he came in the driveway, I stopped him. I said, "Look, the press is here. You don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to." He said, I want to tell them what happened. I have to speak about this." And he literally spoke to the press for 40 minutes, an unbelievable witness to the execution of Orlando Hall. And I had to say the Channel 2 reporter was looking for sensation, looking to say that Orlando didn't apologize for his sins and so forth. Even said something, she started off, said, "Well, what did he say? What was he doing? We didn't even understand what he said." And Yusuf said he was praying. He was praying in Arabic. He was repeating the first chapter of the Quran. And he was very respectful but very clear to the reporter who wanted to say that Orlando was not repentant. He said, "If you could spend 5 minutes with Orlando Hall, you would know that he was very sorry for what he did. He was a 19-year-old boy when he did it, and he's been in solitary confinement for 27 years, finding his soul." It's amazing. I stood out at the corner with two of Orlando Hall's sons and one son's wife at the time he was executed. These things have to be stopped eventually, and I think they will be, because I think people are waking up. They may not be stopped before we change administrations. So what are you going to do with your one amazing life that you've been given? What are you going to do? I've decided really that we can spend an awful lot of time in anger and hatred, or we can spend more time loving. And it's difficult. It's difficult. I could spend a lot of time hating Donald Trump. I really could. I could get up every morning and say that, low down so-and-so, and spend a lot of time, a lot of my energy hating. And what good does it do? It steals the very spirit of my life. How can you be happy and hate? The only thing they have in common is the first letter. They both start with H, but you can't hate and be happy at the same time. And I see a lot of my friends who every time we start, I hate him. Don't hate him. We have to learn how to love that goes beyond hate. We really do. And those people out there who are so rabid fans of Donald Trump, the crowd in Valdosta, Georgia last night was huge. Very few people wearing masks. I mean, they're not going to have enough printers to make Darwin Awards in the next coming year, really. I mean, really, there's going to be an awful lot of death out of ignorance and out of a man who simply does not care about the lives of others. And that's where Donald Trump is. And he's a sick man. I don't guess he can help it. But I'm not going to spend much time on hate, because hate destroys me more than it destroys him by far. It's like, as I've told you before, hate and revenge, all those things are, one person said, it's like eating rat poison and expecting the rat to die. It doesn't go away. it simply doesn't go away. So we stand at the corner of darkness, and we've had 4 years of darkness. I mean, darker than we've ever been before, in my opinion. I don't think we've ever been in a position like we are right now. We were not in this position during the Civil War, because the winner of the Civil War did not have nuclear weapons. The winner of the Civil War couldn't destroy the planet, but the winner of this war can. So we're right on the corner of darkness and gratitude. I am gratified, and I am amazingly thankful that 77 million people decided to turn a little bit toward the light, not because he's a Democrat, but simply because the rest of the society is so dark. I have gratitude for that. And it's scary that, 72 million or however many it was voted for Mr. Trump. And most of them, he's already raised $270 million out of people who have trouble paying their bills. Little small amounts going into his pocket. So I think we as Unitarian Universalists, as progressives, as liberal thinking people, should join with the liberal Christian community around, because the majority of the Christian community in this nation are not on that side. They're not on the side of executions. Every major denomination, Christian denomination in this nation, has a statement against executions. Every single one. The masses of Christianity in America are not racist. They're not sexist. They're not foaming at the mouth fundamentalist. They're progressive people thinking and looking ahead and caring for others. That's where the Christian community really is. The right side of that equation is a scary bunch. And it's not really Christianity at all. It's fascism. And those are the choices we have. I hope, get up every day to check the news to make sure, we're still on a track toward Inauguration Day. But it's going to be hard. It's going to take persistence, and it's going to take courage. And I think that we've got an opportunity to turn away from the darkness as a nation and begin to, we've got a whole lot to be thankful for. The richest nation in the world. And the other book this book, The Warmth of Other Suns, by the way, if you've ever had any question about your privilege for being white, read this book. Because I don't care where you've been, you've not been where those people were. And as they say, her new book, Caste, is one of the best books on the racial situation in America today, which I will get very soon. But what I want you to do mostly is to answer that question that Mary Oliver asked. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it? Is it to be stuck into television or online, on Facebook, all these other things? Or is it to walk every day sacredly in gratitude for the life you've been given, and to stand up and speak against the force of darkness? That's where we're at. I believe in this congregation. I'm glad to know that you're entering the next year with last year's bills paid and pledges paid. I hope you continue to support this congregation, and I hope people watching on Facebook later continue to do so. There's a reason we are here. We are here to save our nation. We are here to save our community. We're here to save ourselves. We're here to save our planet. That's why we're here. We're not here just because we're better than everybody else. We're not here because we're smarter than anybody else. We're here because we are a community committed to doing justice and to bringing about peace on earth. And thinking, some of our congregations have this change the world in their vision. How absurd is that? Changing the world. But by being who you are, that's precisely what you are doing. You are changing the world. With every breath you take, with every prayer you make, you are changing the world. So continue to support this congregation. May have told you this many times, that I was over in a retirement village across from our church in Bloomington one time, and going to see a member, and this older woman stopped me in the cafeteria. She had the hairdress and the clothes that I recognized immediately as the holiness woman, like the ones I grew up with. And she stopped me and she said, "Are you that minister? Are you the minister from across the street over there, the Unitarian Church?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "I pray for you every day." She said, "I pray for your church every day." And I'm thinking, "Oh, Lord, what am I going to say here?" I said, "Well, that's fine. I don't mind people praying for me." And she said, "No, you don't understand. You don't understand. I'm not praying that you'll change." She said, "I'm praying that I'm thankful that you're there." She said, "My son was gay, and there was no place for him in our church. And if it hadn't been for you, I think he would be dead, because he was near suicide. But you took him in." He said, "That's why I pray for you every day." That's why we're here. We're here to save lives, to save loves, to save a nation, to save a planet. Believe in that. Walk in that. Get up every day and say, "What am I going to do with this one wild, precious life? I'm going to save this planet." Because somebody's got to do it. And I think we're suited to the task. Blessed be. Let us sing our closing hymn.